Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. In this episode, we are talking about building your practice's value dashboard. Now, I want you to understand when I talk about value, I'm talking even about the valuation of your practice. So revenue is not the same as value. A busy practice is not necessarily a valuable practice. This is going to help you understand what makes a practice worth owning and therefore worth selling by building visibility to metrics that buyers, lenders, and smart leaders actually care about. So before we begin, I want you to recognize that I have looked at probably a dozen practices in the last 18 months. All 12 were deemed below the valuation that the owner wanted. And the reason for it was twofold. One, they did not have systems in place that showed independence of the owner. And two, the owner's contributions were worth more than the net benefit of the practice. And I'm going to say it again. The owner's contributions were worth more than the net benefit of the practice. What I mean by that is I am saying if I removed the owner and I removed the expense that the owner was paying, the expense of the owner plus the net profit was less than the expense it would cost me to replace that person. So some of you think that you're building this asset when you don't recognize all you're doing is building an asset dependent on you. So I want you to understand what actually determines practice value, because when you can step out of your organization and it can run, you have built, in my opinion, an asset. When a business is run, managed, and dependent on you, the value is only as good as them being able to replace you for less money. So if you're taking $500,000 to run a practice and I can replace that $500,000 expense with $100,000, then there's a $400,000 benefit to me in buying your practice. But if you're only pulling $250K out and it's going to cost me $250K to replace you, then there's no benefit to me. All I'm doing is buying a company that's not producing anything left over. See, the problem is that most of you, when you're selling your practice, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell a practice and a job at the same time. So you come to me and you say, hey, Brandon, I've got this great job. You're going to walk into $250K. And I'm like, well, I'm only walking into $250K if ultimately I take your place. So what you're doing is you're asking me to take a job in your company for $250K. That brings me no benefit. I don't want to work in your business. I want to invest in your business. I want to be able to take systems and pull money out. What part of that do you not understand? I have 3 different companies. I don't need another job. I'm looking to invest in a company where I can spend a little bit of time and grow it and expand it. But if your job is a 60-hour-a-week job, I have to hire someone to fill that position, whether that be me or something else. So the way that you value your time does not mean that I'm going to value the time in that job the same. And so what actually is going to determine practice value when a buyer, investor, or lender evaluates your practice, revenue is just a starting point. The real question is how durable it is, how transferable it is, how scalable it is, and how systemized it is. Practices that score high on these dimensions will command significantly higher valuations and give owners more options. First thing is margins and growth. Profit margins, consistent revenue growth, and that's profit margins after we pay all appropriate functional salaries. So I want to be clear, just because you take a draw does not mean that's profit, because sometimes you underpay yourself an owner's wage for the function you play in your business. So if you are a CEO and you're taking 150K salary and I can replace you for 150K and there's leftover 500K of net benefit, then yes, I've got a 500K profit margin. But if it's going to cost me 350 to replace you, then honestly, 150, that's another 200. I'm taking 200 off what you're calling your net profit of that 500. So it's really a 300 net benefit, just so you know. So profit margins and consistent revenue growth signal operational health and earning potential. The next thing that I look at is referral diversity. I want to make sure I'm not dependent on one funding source or one referral source, et cetera, because that's a major risk. Where's the sustainability and the stability? A broad, diversified referral base is a major asset because one, it shows sustainability, but two, then I can see growth potential. The next thing is like leadership depth. What is your bench, as I call it? So a practice that trained leads, documented processes is far more transferable than one with the dependency on an owner. One of the things that I was able to do to help a practice sell and get more than they ever imagined was we had the owner go on sabbatical. I took over the operational sabbatical by running day-to-day remote. We had a clinical director already in place. We had all of the leadership, and we were able to show a sample size that this company could run without the owner and that I could transfer every function to them for a fraction of the cost. Boom, that owner got huge because, again, I was seen as a consultant, not an ongoing expense, and I was able to show everything I did and how much it would cost them in that way. So being able to show that leadership depth and that, like, hey, you can keep me on retainer, you can fire me, I become a variable expense and I don't hit the bottom line of that practice. And we were able to sustain a greater valuation on the practice as a result. Patient retention. So understanding that patients are completing their care, that they're not discharging based on self-discharge, but discharging based on outcome. Understanding the lifetime value of a customer, of a patient is really important as well. You know, something that also I look at is, what are the systems that run? Because again, systems run businesses. So, oh my gosh, they've got an incredible EMR. Oh my gosh, they've got all this technology, AI, all that stuff. The more systems that are in place in which I just need to find the right people, it actually brings more value. So when I can actually show that component, those are all things. And then obviously, revenue generators, retention of employees, retention of what the valuation of people that they stay on board, because in our business, we're a people-oriented business. We're buying people and we're buying systems, just so that everyone knows. And so one of the things I want you to do is I want you to calculate your owner dependency score. So the most honest question a practice owner can ask is, what breaks if I step away for 90 days? Your answer will review and it will reveal your dependency score. So if you stepped away for 90 days, would payroll processing break? Who runs it? Referral relationships, are they personal or institutional? Hiring decisions, can anyone do it? Delivery of care, are you delivering care? Day-to-day decisions, do staff escalate everything? Team morale, does that drop without you? Scheduling and flow, revenue, accounts payable, accounts receivable, patient care coordination, patient care challenges, all those things are going to help you calculate that owner dependency score, if that makes sense. So the next thing I want you to think of is I want you to start to build your monthly value dashboard. So what gets measured gets managed. Owners who review key metrics monthly make faster, better decisions, and they build a data record that demonstrates practice health over time. So I have daily metrics that I measure. I have weekly metrics. I have monthly metrics, I have quarterly metrics, and I have annual metrics. But here's the other thing. I also measure in daily averages. So we're looking at total revenue collected. We're looking at net profit margin. We're looking at cash reserves on hand. These are all the owner, financial value that I'm looking at. Outstanding AR over 30, 60, 90 days. I want to know my average primary payer speed to cash, essentially. And then I want to know operational metrics like total visits completed, new evaluation started, cancellation, staff turnover rate, patient turnover rate, what the lifetime value of an employee is, what the lifetime value of a patient is, etc. A 12-month rolling dashboard tells a story. So 1 month of data is a snapshot, 12 months of data is a trend. Trends are going to show buyers and lenders want to see that. So we have to build a practice playbook too. That's our system. So part of this playbook is written evidence that the practice can run without you. This is a great opportunity to use a software like Trainial. This is where we put in our systems and our SOPs. We document how scheduling, billing, intake, discharge, daily operations actually work step by step. Hiring and HR workflows. Document your hiring process. Job templates, onboarding checklist, performance management approach. These are all things that are going to benefit you. Vendor and payer contracts list every key vendor, payer, service provider, and account numbers, contacts, and renewal terms. We also want to document how we market, what our referral tactics are. So I used to have specific ways that I would market our practice, the doctors I'd go to, when I would go to them, who my points of contact were, what I would bring, what I would say, and how I would execute, and how I would track the referrals as a result. Capturing those activities is really, really critical. We need to also be able to reduce our owner dependency through delegation. So documenting the processes that we are delegating, our standard processes with every task currently managed by who, when, where, and how we're measuring progress with that. How we train our key staff. Providing comprehensive training is critical. Ensuring that staff fully understand the documented procedures and the expectations. Having quizzes built into that is really important. Supervise and feedback, understanding how to monitor initial execution, provide constructual feedback. All these things are really important. And then empower and delegate. Once complete, you are able to empower and delegate because you've got that structure, and then you update accordingly. And so ultimately, those are some things that can really bring value. But the next thing I want you to recognize for improving the value of your practice, diversify your revenue streams. How are you building private pay? How are you building telehealth? How are you building different group activities? How are you building non-licensed revenue streams? Supervision, training, wellness programs, consulting, education programs, creating all different ways to tie revenue beyond just people and insurance is critical to optimizing the way that your practice can grow in today's environment. And so what I've found is that when we understand the quantitative factors that influence your practice's market, value is crucial to that strategic planning, but qualitative is what differentiates your practice. Quantitative is the valuation, qualitative is the differentiation. When we're looking at, how we value a practice, a lot of the time it's, anywhere from 1 to 3 times annual revenue, depending, but your net plays a big part. And so net depends if you're going off the EBITDA. When we're going off the EBITDA, usually it's a 3 to 6 time multiplier, depending on size. It can obviously go to above that, but right now I'm seeing on average 3 to 6 EBITDA, but how we come up with that EBITDA is everything. And if you don't have an EBITDA, then obviously there's other ways that we will create that valuation. So if you're not profitable, doesn't mean you can't sell the practice, but we're going to value it differently. Very transparently right now, private practices are often going around 1 time your annual revenue with a 15 to 20% net EBITDA. I mean, that's generally what I'm seeing, or a 2 to 3 time EBITDA, depending on what's higher. Are there times where your total revenue is less than 1 time? 100%. So I want to be crystal clear. I've seen $1 million practices that bring in millions of dollars of revenue and they're not profitable and they're not worth anything. So they may get like 200K just for facility and systems. So it's kind of like you could say your house is worth something, but your house is not worth something until you have a buyer. So just because your neighbor sold the house for $1 million doesn't mean you're going to get $1 million for your house. So it's really important. But what I do want you to know is that practices with documented systems and processes can command an additional 20 to 40% in sale price. Again, building in your systems is going to bring so much more. Owner-dependent practices risk losing up to half of their potential value at the point of sale, and the business is inseparable from the owner. So when I helped sell that practice very transparently, because I showed proof of concept that the owner was not in any way involved, that owner got to totally not be connected to the sale. They held me on for 90 days to proof of concept. We showed the value. The owner and I were available on an on-call basis, never called on. They met all of the earnouts, and it was a great sale. So these are things that can happen. Practices with 3 or more diversified revenue streams are perceived as less risky and consistently attract higher multiples from buyers. So just things that I want you to think about in this process. So most practice owners are building a job, not a business. The difference is whether the practice can generate value without you standing in the middle of it. Very important. And so for all you private practice owners, this means shifting from direct service delivery to building systems and teams that can operate autonomously. The true value lies in practice's ability to thrive and generate value and revenue, even when the owner is not physically present. So when people ask me like, hey, Brandon, one of your practices that you manage day in and day out is across the country. How do you manage quote unquote 50 employees? Well, I've got managers, I've got team, I got staff. I'm able to create systems. This idea that I could manage your business in Ireland. I could manage a company anywhere in the world. There's no reason physically that we need to. If we hire the right people, we create the right systems, we create the right communication and accountability, anything's possible. So when an owner says they're selling to relocate, I'm like, okay, you're 2 in your business then. All you're trying to do is find someone to take your job. So I challenge you. How are you creating policies, procedures, structure, systems, and people that transform the function of your business so that you don't work in it, you work on it? So some of the common value killing mistakes that I'm seeing: undocumented systems, inconsistent financials. I literally fell in love with a practice recently that I was ready to buy, made an incredible offer. But what affected the deal and why it didn't go through was their financials were inconsistent. I've had 2 deals that I've taken full up almost to close that have failed because of inconsistent financials. Invest in your financials, invest in your accounting, your bookkeeping, utilizing companies like Accounted For or CPA firms or whoever it may be, really critical. The other thing is you don't have an exit strategy. You don't have what that looks like. Without a clear plan of your eventual departure or succession, the future of your practice is uncertain. So it diminishes that perceived long-term value. Owner-centric referrals. This was something I had to overcome in my own practice. Was my mother-in-law was the driving force of referrals. We had to get beyond her brand. So don't make the brand about you, make the brand about the practice. You know, single payer risk. I almost fell into this trap. When we were getting out of one of the industries we were in, I tried to make a contract where I said we would become an exclusive Kaiser Permanente clinic. Big mistake, didn't happen. That would have been a major issue if we had done that. So then you just become only as valuable as that single contract. So you just have to recognize that. So as we look at tools and resources, I want you to have financial dashboards. You've got to have the right practice management software. You need to have the right coaches in place, the right consultants, the right valuation resources. You need your playbook, your SOP tools, your, traineals, etc., so that you can get to that next gear. So I think as we look at this, we want to look at our collections, our net revenue versus collection rate. We want to look at our owner dependency score. We want to look at our staff retention. We want to look at our diversity, referral source diversity, our payer mix breakdown. All of these things are crucial, and we want to build an exit strategy early. And so when I'm looking at that exit strategy, we have to be strategic necessity, know your value, identify your buyers, build transferable systems, and plan 3 to 5 years ahead. All things that are really crucial. And so as you're looking for implementing some of this, transforming insights into action, I want you to list every task you currently can do and the dependency on you to do it. Pull your last 3 months of revenue. Identify your top 3 payers. Identify the percentage of revenue connected to them. Start your SOP playbook. Create a 30-day implementation checklist based on that. Establish your schedule for your regular financial dashboard reviews. Delegate at least one new thing every week. Develop your comprehensive playbook. Research and initiate contact with 2 to 3 new referral sources, and conduct an internal workshop on key value metrics, fostering team understanding and ownership over what's driving change in your practice and how to impact its value and growth. And so as we are able to understand what is determining your practice value, you're going to be able to look at a lot of different things. You're going to be able to calculate your owner dependency score. You're going to be able to build more dashboards with KPIs that are meaningful. You're going to be able to build a playbook that you can operate from, and you're going to be able to reduce things through delegation and diversify revenue. So I thank you for being part of this episode and tuning in. Don't forget to like us, subscribe, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.